My name is Evan Mercer, and for 7 years I worked security at the Byron Nuclear Generating Station in northern Illinois, about 90 miles west of Chicago, where the farmland runs flat and endless and the winter wind can cut through 3 layers of canvas and wool like they were tissue. Before that, I did 4 years in the Marines, then a stretch with the Sheriff's Department. I am not a dramatic person. I do not believe in ghosts, demons, cursed ground, or any of the things people like to blame when they can't explain why a place makes the skin on the back of their neck pull tight. I believe in procedures. At a nuclear plant, procedures are religion. Every badge swipe, every locked door, every escort log, every maintenance sign-off, every response drill, every flashlight battery, every camera angle, every call-out list taped inside every cabinet door. It has to be that way. People hear the word reactor and imagine green sludge and movie sirens and mushroom clouds. The truth is less cinematic and much more strict. Most days smell like concrete dust, coffee that's been on a burner too long, machine oil, and cold air dragged in from outside every time a steel door opens. I took the night shift because it paid better and because nights suited me. Less talking. Less admin traffic. Fewer contractors wandering where they weren't supposed to be. From 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., my world narrowed into patrol routes, monitor walls, radio checks, and the hum of systems I could never fully understand but came to know by sound. That first week, the training officer slid a stapled packet across the break room table and told me, "Memorize the post orders, then memorize the unofficial ones." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. His name was Duffy, ex-Navy, broad shoulders, gray mustache, one of those men who looked built from old fence posts and nicotine. We were alone in the security office annex, halfway through a pot of coffee so scorched it tasted metallic. He tapped the packet with one thick finger. "The official orders keep you employed," he said. "The unofficial rules keep everyone calm." Calm from what? He gave me a look that said I was still too new to be asking questions like that. Then he leaned back in his chair and started listing them from memory. If the maintenance tunnel camera by the East Service corridor goes fuzzy for less than 10 seconds, do not call it in unless it happens 3 times in an hour. If a phone rings on level B of the old turbine administration wing after midnight, do not answer it unless dispatch confirms they placed the call. If you are doing a foot patrol in the auxiliary building and hear someone behind you match your footsteps, do not turn around until you reach a marked door or a camera-visible intersection. If a worker signs in at the protected area access desk wearing an old laminated badge with a blue stripe instead of red, escort them back out and call supervision, even if the badge scan's valid. And the one Duffy paused on longest. If you find a hard hat resting on the floor in the middle of an otherwise clear hallway, do not touch it with your hands. Call operations and wait for a second officer. I stared at him the whole time, expecting him to crack a grin. He never did. "That's not funny," I said. "It's not supposed to be. Why are these not in the actual procedures?" "Because nobody wants to explain them to corporate." I laughed once, short and dry, but Duffy just watched me. Then he said, "You'll do better here if you learn the difference between a rule that exists because somebody in an office imagined a problem, and a rule that exists because something happened often enough that people got tired of pretending it didn't." That sat with me all shift. The station had 2 units, mirror-like from the outside if you didn't know better, hulking concrete and steel shapes surrounded by chain link, barriers, sodium lights, and roads cut through open fields. At night, In winter, the site felt less like a workplace and more like an offshore platform somehow dropped in the middle of dark farmland. Beyond the perimeter there was nothing but frozen ground, the beam of the road, and the occasional farmhouse light miles off like a ship at sea. My patrol partner for the first month was a guy named Luis Ortega, former National Guard, from Rockford. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice, which made people pay more attention when he did speak. Around 1 a.m. on my third night, while we were walking the lower access road between the protected area and a maintenance support building, I asked him if the strange rules were just a long-running joke for new hires. Luis took a while to answer. "You ever work a place long enough," he said, "you start noticing the same odd things happen to different people. Doesn't mean it's magic." "What does it mean?" He adjusted the flashlight on his vest. "Means there's probably an explanation nobody likes." That answer irritated me because it sounded wise while saying almost nothing. But a few minutes later he added, "The trick is, sometimes the explanation is worse than the rumor." At 2:17 that morning, I got my first taste of why those rules existed. We were back inside, making our round through a section of the older administrative corridor attached to the turbine side. Most office staff were long gone. The hall was lit in strips. Bright white fluorescent panels spaced over cinderblock walls painted some government shade between beige and gray. Bulletin boards with safety posters. Locked offices. A copier room. A vending alcove. Everything dead quiet except the low building ventilation and the dull, constant industrial throb that seemed to live inside the concrete. We had just passed room 214 when a phone started ringing farther down the hall. Not a cell phone. Not a modern office chirp. A desk phone. The old kind, loud and sharp. Luis stopped walking immediately. The ring came again. Somewhere around the corner, beyond a fire door standing open on its magnetic hold. I remember the stupid little details because fear always sharpens the useless things. The smell of microwaved soup lingering from an empty break room. A loose corner on a "Zero injuries starts with you" poster. The way the light in the next corridor seemed a fraction dimmer than ours. The phone rang a third time. I said, "Shouldn't we check that?" Luis didn't move. "Dispatch," he said into his radio, calm as if ordering lunch. "Confirm any outgoing internal calls to admin wing B level, east corridor." A crackle. Then dispatch came back, female voice, bored but alert. "Negative on any initiated call traffic to that section." The phone rang again. Luis looked at me. "Rule says we don't answer." I hated that. Every part of my training told me unattended activity in a secured area had to be checked. It could have been a contractor left late, a malfunction, a diversion. I started forward and Luis caught my sleeve without grabbing hard. "Listen to me," he said. "You can go against me after you've been here a year. Not tonight." The ringing stopped. Not gradually. Not as if someone picked up. Just stopped. Dispatch said she'd pulled the nearest camera. We waited another 30 seconds, then cleared the corridor by the book, fast and methodical. The phone was sitting on a secretary desk in a shared admin bay. No one there. No sign of entry. No open line. When I pressed the call log button, it showed no recent incoming calls at all. I looked at Luis, expecting him to enjoy my discomfort. He didn't. He just looked tired. "Old systems," he said. But on the way back, he took the long route instead of passing the admin bay again. Things got worse slowly, which is the most effective way for a place to get under your skin. Not big incidents. Small ones. A camera that picked up movement in a sealed stairwell, and showed nothing when we responded. A janitor on graveyard shift who swore he heard two men arguing in one of the decommissioned office suites, only for the access records to show nobody had badged into that section in 9 hours. A clipboard appearing on a corridor floor exactly centered between the walls, like it had been set there with a measuring tape. And one night, on my 12th shift, I found out why nobody touched a hard hat with their bare hands. I was doing an interior patrol alone because Luis had been pulled to assist with a vehicle inspection at the owner-controlled area gate. It was a little after 3 a.m., that dead band of the night when even the machinery seemed exhausted. I was moving through a service hallway connecting the maintenance shops to an equipment access corridor. Concrete walls. Painted floor stripes. Exposed piping overhead. No windows. My flashlight wasn't necessary, but I carried it anyway, more out of habit than need. Halfway down the hall I saw it. A white hard hat. Sitting upside down in the exact center of the floor. Not near the wall where someone might have set it down. Not by a bench or locker. Centered. Like a prop in a training video. I stopped 10 feet away. The corridor had been clear on my previous pass less than 40 minutes earlier. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 3. I've got an unattended hard hat in shop corridor C, midpoint by fire door 12. Requesting second officer and ops notification. The reply came at once, too fast, like they were relieved I'd called instead of touching it. Copy, Unit 3. Hold position. Second officer en route. I stood there staring at the thing. It had a faded sticker on the front from a refueling outage years earlier. Scratches, scuffs, grease along the rim. An ordinary hard hat. I told myself someone was messing with me. Some bored technician. Some old-timer prank built into the culture. Then I noticed there was something inside it. A folded note. And that was the first moment, standing in that empty hall at 3 a.m. with the reactor humming somewhere through layers of concrete and steel, that I began to understand the strange rules weren't there to protect us from intruders. They were there because something inside the plant kept trying to get our attention. The note inside the hard hat looked ordinary enough at first. A torn square from a yellow legal pad, folded twice. No blood, no threat, no dramatic nonsense. Just paper. That made it worse. Because weird things at industrial sites usually have practical explanations. A misplaced tool. A prank. Somebody on nights getting sloppy. But a note placed inside a hard hat in the exact center of an empty secured corridor at 3 in the morning felt intentional in a way I didn't like at all. I heard footsteps coming from the west end of the hall and nearly jumped out of my skin before I saw Officer Mendez round the corner with Operations Shift Manager Carla Hensley behind him. Carla was in her late 40s, compact, serious, hard hat clipped to one hip, radio on her shoulder, one of those people who moved like they were always already late to the next problem. Mendez took one look at me, one look at the hat, and said, "Good. You didn't touch it." Carla didn't say anything. She pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves from her pocket, crouched, and lifted the note out carefully. "What the hell?" I said. She opened it and read it without changing expression. "Don't read that out loud," Mendez said quietly. That was such a strange sentence that for a second I didn't process it. Carla folded the note back up and slipped it into a clear evidence sleeve from her clipboard pouch. "This corridor was checked when?" 2:29, I said. "Clear then. I came back through at 3:06 and found it. She nodded once. Any cameras? Cross-angle only. You might catch approach from either end, but not the center placement. She looked up at the ceiling as if she could see through concrete and conduit into the camera housings above. Of course. Mendez used the toe of his boot to nudge the hard hat toward the wall without directly handling it. Inside was nothing else. No badge, no tools, no name label, just sweat-stained suspension straps and dust. Carla told dispatch to preserve the video and log the item under unusual security-related activity, not safety, not maintenance. Security-related. I said. What did the notes say? Carla stood and gave me a flat look. You're new enough that I'm going to tell you something once. If you find writing in a misplaced item, don't read it aloud inside the building. That makes no sense. It does here. Why? Because every time somebody does, something else happens. Mendez muttered. Carla. But she kept her eyes on me. You want a scientific explanation, Mercer? I don't have one. I have incident logs and patterns. That's what I work with. I should have pushed harder, but there was something in her face I didn't like. Not fear exactly. Not superstition. More like the exhausted caution of a person who had ignored a hazard once and paid for it. The note went into a chain of custody bag. The hard hat got carried away with a reaching tool from the maintenance shop, like it was contaminated. Nobody laughed. Nobody rolled their eyes. That was the part that crawled under my skin. In every workplace there are legends, but the people telling them usually smirk at least a little. Here, they behaved like they were trying not to spook a horse standing too close to a highway. When the corridor was clear again, Mendez and I resumed patrol. Can you at least tell me if the note was a threat? I asked. No. So what then? He kept walking. Directions. That sat in my chest like a stone. At first I thought he meant directions as in instructions, but he shook his head when I said that. Directions, he repeated. Like go left, go right, open this, don't open that. Most of them are location-specific. Most? He didn't answer. I finished the shift on edge and drove home under a black sky that was just starting to pale over the cornfields. My apartment was in Dixon then, about 40 minutes away if the roads were clear. I should have gone straight to bed, but I sat at my kitchen table with the cheap blinds half open and the coffee maker rattling itself awake, trying to make the whole thing fit into a shape I could accept. Prank. Internal culture. Hazing. That was still my preferred explanation. By the next week, I had to start letting go of that. The first real crack came on a Friday night during a freezing rain event. Ice was ticking against the outer walls, and everyone on site was in a bad mood because weather turns every routine action into a risk assessment. Around 12:40 a.m., dispatch called me and Luis to do a walk-down of an access-controlled records room in one of the older admin connectors. A motion alert had tripped twice in 20 minutes. The room contained archived paper records, old maintenance binders, some boxed procedure revisions from before everything went digital. Important enough to care about, not important enough to be visited often. We swiped in. The lights came up automatically with that institutional lag, one row at a time, revealing shelves, gray file cabinets, bankers' boxes, and that faint smell old paper gets when it sits for years in conditioned air. No one inside. We checked the door seals. Intact. Luis was scanning the far side when I noticed one of the rolling archive ladders had been moved away from the shelves and parked in the middle of the room. On the top platform sat a radio. A handheld security radio. My radio. For one irrational second I thought I'd lost it without noticing. Then I felt mine heavy on my vest. Louise saw it too and stopped cold. "Don't touch it." That sentence again. Same tone. The radio on the ladder was an older model, one we hadn't used in years. Scratched housing, faded channel label, department stencil half worn off. It was switched on. Volume low. No static. Then it crackled. A man's voice came through, thin and grainy, clipped by age or interference. "Repeat, we have one still in the stairwell." Silence. Then another burst. "Not on the roster." "I say again, not on the." Static swallowed the rest. I looked at Luis. His face had gone pale under the fluorescent lights. Dispatch came over our actual radios asking for status, and Luis answered too quickly, voice tight. "False motion, standing by, maintain channel discipline." He was shutting them out. The old radio on the ladder hissed again. This time there were footsteps in the audio. Running maybe? Then a loud metallic bang. Then breathing. A person breathing hard, very close to the microphone. And then somebody said, clear as day, "Don't let him take your badge." The transmission cut. Not faded. Cut. Luis walked to the door, opened it, and held it there. "We're leaving." I didn't move. "What was that?" "We're leaving." "Was that recorded?" He looked angrier than I'd ever seen him. "Mercer. There are tones grown men use when they are too frightened to sound frightened, and I heard one then. So I went. Back in the corridor, he keyed dispatch and requested a supervisor with one of those carefully controlled explanations that sound normal if you don't listen too hard. Unidentified equipment found. Possible abandoned legacy device. Needs collection. When Carla arrived, she didn't ask us to repeat what we heard. She just asked one question. "Did it say anything to either of you specifically?" "No," Luis said immediately. I hesitated, and Carla's eyes flicked to me. "Not specifically," I said. She held that look half a second longer than comfortable. Then she nodded and went into the room alone with a collection bag and gloves. Later, in the break room, I pushed Luis harder than I should have. "What the hell was that?" He stirred powdered creamer into coffee he wasn't drinking. "Years ago, before my time, there was some kind of incident during an outage. Temporary staff. A missing worker. Bad accountability. Confusion over access records. That doesn't explain a dead radio broadcasting in a locked room." "No," he said. "It doesn't. Then why is everybody acting like it's a weather pattern? Like this just happens?" He gave a humorless smile. "Because the first few times it happened, people did exactly what you're doing right now. They investigated it like it was a normal security problem. And every time they treated it like something to solve instead of something to log and survive, somebody got hurt." I waited. He took a breath. Trips. Falls. Fingers crushed in doors. One guy walked into a controlled area transition without his dosimeter because he was chasing a voice he thought was calling for help. Another swore he followed a contractor with a valid badge down a corridor, lost sight of him for 2 seconds, and found an empty dead-end mechanical room instead. That last part raised every hair on my arms. "Who was the contractor?" Luis met my eyes. "No entry record. No camera confirmation. Nobody ever identified him." The freezing rain worsened through the night, rattling the siding and coating every outside handrail in glass. At 4:10 a.m., I got assigned to vehicle barrier observation from an enclosed post near the protected area perimeter. It was one of the lonelier stations on site, a reinforced booth with thick glass, a heater that clicked too loudly, 2 camera monitors, and a direct line to dispatch. Outside, the sodium lights turned the ice into a dirty orange shine. Beyond the fence was darkness and flat fields. I remember watching the sleet streak sideways through the floodlights and thinking how relieved I was to be away from the interior of the plant for a couple of hours. Then the phone on the wall rang. Not my radio. Not dispatch over the speaker. The wall phone. 1 ring. 2. I picked it up before I even remembered the rule. Barrier post, I said. At first there was only a low roar, like open wind or tires on wet pavement. Then a woman's voice, calm and close, said, "You're not supposed to answer that one." And the line went dead. I stood there holding the receiver long enough for the dial tone to start. When I called dispatch and asked who had just called my post, there was a pause on the other end. Then the dispatcher said, very carefully, "No one placed a call to barrier observation." That should have been enough. It should have convinced me to keep my head down, follow the strange rules, and stop asking questions. Instead, it did the opposite. Because now it wasn't just stories I'd heard secondhand. Now the place had spoken directly to me. And the worst part wasn't the voice. It was that she had sounded less like a threat than a warning. After the call at the barrier post, I stopped trying to explain things away as pranks or misfires. You can rationalize a lot when it's happening to someone else. It gets harder when you hear a voice address you directly on a line that, by all records, no one used. I didn't tell Luis right away. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted to sit with it first. See if it happened again. See if there was some pattern I could catch before I brought it to someone who might already have answers they didn't want to share. That lasted about 2 shifts. On Sunday night, around 1:30 a.m., we were assigned a joint patrol with operations through a section of the plant most of the day shift people avoided unless they had a reason. It was part of the older infrastructure, connector hallways, service stairwells, and auxiliary access routes that had been built, modified, sealed, and reopened over decades of upgrades. Nothing was abandoned exactly, but parts of it felt like they belonged to earlier versions of the station. Carla was with us again, along with a junior reactor operator named Chris Halverson, who kept checking his tablet like it might suddenly tell him something important he'd missed. We moved in a line, Carla up front, then Chris, then me, Luis covering rear. The stairwell we entered was labeled S12 Auxiliary Access. It dropped 2 levels below the main corridor, concrete steps, metal handrails cold to the touch, the kind of place where every sound echoes just enough to confuse your sense of distance. Halfway down, Chris stopped. "You hear that?" he asked. I hadn't until he said it. Then I did. Footsteps. Below us. Slow. Measured. Someone ascending. Carla didn't hesitate. "Hold position." The footsteps continued for maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. We waited. No door opened below. No voice. No further movement. Luis leaned slightly over the railing, listening. "Could be someone on the lower landing." Carla keyed her radio. "Dispatch, confirm any personnel logged in lower S12 access." A pause. Then, "Negative. No active work orders or access records in that section." Chris swallowed. "Maybe someone bypassed." No, Carla said. That door requires dual authorization after hours. We descended the rest of the way carefully, one step at a time. The lower landing was empty. No open doors. No movement. No sign anyone had been there. Chris let out a nervous laugh. Okay. That's weird. Louise didn't laugh. Neither did Carla. Continue, she said. We moved into the lower corridor, a narrow stretch lined with old conduit and emergency lighting strips that cast everything in a dull, washed-out glow. The air felt cooler down there, like the ventilation didn't quite reach as strongly. That's when I saw the door. It was propped open about 6 inches, a steel fire door leading into a side room marked storage, restricted. Carla stopped immediately. That door should be closed, she said. Chris checked his tablet. No work orders assigned to this room. Louise shifted beside me. You want us to clear it? Carla nodded once. By the book. Louise and I approached together. He pushed the door open slowly with his foot while I angled my flashlight into the gap. The room inside was small. Shelving. Old equipment. A workbench. Nothing moving. Then I noticed the chair. It was positioned in the center of the room, facing the door. And on the chair, another hard hat. This one wasn't scuffed or worn. It looked new. Louise exhaled quietly. Don't touch it. Chris stepped closer behind us. What is with the... Back up, Carla said sharply. Chris froze. I couldn't take my eyes off the hard hat. It wasn't the object itself. It was how deliberate it looked. Placed. Centered. Waiting. And just like before, there was something inside it. A folded note. Carla didn't move this time. She looked at me. Mercer, she said. You found the last one. You handled this. Same protocol. That surprised me. You sure? I asked. She nodded. Gloves. Slow. Don't read it out loud. Louise handed me a pair without a word. I stepped into the room, every sound amplified, the scrape of my boot on concrete, the faint hum of distant systems, my own breathing inside my ears. Up close, the hard hat looked perfectly clean. Too clean. Like it hadn't been used at all. I reached in and took the note. It felt heavier than paper should. That's the only way I can describe it. Not physically heavy, but like it carried weight. I stepped back out into the corridor before unfolding it. Everyone was watching me. Read it, Chris said too quickly. Carla shot him a look. Quiet. I opened the paper. The handwriting was neat. Block letters. It said, Do not follow the second set of footsteps. My stomach dropped. Louis swore under his breath. Chris frowned. What does that even? That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Behind us. Coming from the stairwell we had just descended. Slow. Measured. Exactly like before. Except this time. There were 2 sets. One slightly out of sync with the other. Like 2 people walking side by side. Carla turned immediately. Who's there? No response. The footsteps continued. Down the stairs. Closer. Louise whispered. We go. Now. Carla didn't argue. Move, she said. We started down the corridor away from the stairwell, not running, but fast enough that it felt wrong. The footsteps followed. Not speeding up. not slowing down. Just matching us. 2 sets. Always 2. Chris glanced back once. Don't, I said, sharper than I meant to. He faced forward again, breathing hard. The corridor turned left ahead. We took it. The sound of the footsteps shifted with us, echoing differently now, but still there. Still behind. Still 2. We reached a secured door at the end of the hall. Carla badged in quickly. Inside, she said. We filed through. Louise slammed the door shut behind us. The footsteps stopped immediately. Just like that. Gone. Silence. No fading. No retreat. Nothing. Chris leaned against the wall, pale. What the hell was that? No one answered. Because none of us had turned around. None of us had seen anything. But we had all heard it. And I still had the note in my hand. Do not follow the second set of footsteps. I didn't understand what that meant yet. But I knew one thing for certain. The rules weren't just warnings. They were instructions. And something in that building expected us to either follow them or make a mistake. After the stairwell incident, things changed. Not officially. There was no plant-wide alert, no memo, no new training bulletin. The logs were filed the same way they always were, neutral language, minimal interpretation, just enough detail to justify the report without drawing attention to what couldn't be explained. But on nights, among the people who actually moved through the plant after midnight, something shifted. People stopped joking entirely. Even the veterans. Especially them. Luis and I didn't talk much during the first hour after it happened. We finished the patrol, returned to the security office, and filed our reports separately. Carla stayed longer than usual, reviewing camera footage with dispatch, but when I asked later if anything showed up, she just said, "No anomalies." That word, anomalies, was doing a lot of work. Around 4 a.m., when things usually quieted down, I finally told Luis about the phone call at the barrier post. He didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face slowly. "What exactly did she say?" he asked. "You're not supposed to answer that one." Luis nodded like that confirmed something he already suspected. "Okay," he said quietly. "That's not the worst one. That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," he said. "It's supposed to make you careful." I waited for more. After a moment, he said, "There are different types of events here." "Events?" I repeated. "Yeah. Some of them are passive. Sounds. Movement. Stuff being out of place. Things that don't interact with you directly. And the others?" He looked at me. "The others do." That settled heavily between us. "What decides which one it is?" I asked. Luis shook his head. "Nobody knows. But there are patterns." "Like what?" He hesitated. "Then, if it acknowledges you, don't acknowledge it back unless a rule tells you to." I thought about the voice on the phone. I had acknowledged it. That didn't sit well. Before I could ask anything else, dispatch cut in over the radio. "Unit 3, Unit 5, respond to camera alert, maintenance tunnel east service corridor." Luis and I exchanged a look. That was one of the rules. The fuzzy camera. We were already on our feet. "Copy," Luis said. "En route." The maintenance tunnel sat below one of the main connecting structures, a long, narrow passage used for utility access, pipes, cables, conduits running along both sides. It wasn't a place people spent time unless they had a job to do. And it definitely wasn't a place you wanted unexplained movement. When we arrived, the corridor looked normal. Lights steady. No visible activity. But dispatch came back immediately. Camera 12 shows intermittent distortion. Less than 10 seconds each occurrence. 2 instances so far. Luis checked his watch. Time? 3:58 and 4:01. He nodded slightly. Rule threshold is 3 in an hour, he said under his breath. I remembered. If the camera goes fuzzy for less than 10 seconds, don't call it in unless it happens 3 times. We were already here, though. Do we clear it? I asked. Luis hesitated. That alone made my pulse spike. Then dispatch said, 3rd instance just occurred. Luis exhaled. All right, he said. Now we clear it. We moved into the tunnel. It was quieter than the rest of the plant. Not silent, nothing in a nuclear facility ever is, but quieter in a way that made every small sound feel isolated. The hum of electricity. The faint vibration of distant systems. The soft echo of our boots on concrete. Halfway down, my radio gave a quick burst of static. Not a call. Just static. Luis glanced at it, then at me. Keep moving, he said. We reached the midpoint. Nothing. No tools out of place. No open panels. No sign of entry. Luis keyed his radio. Dispatch, tunnel appears clear. Any visual on camera now? A pause. Then, camera is stable. I frowned. So what caused it? Luis didn't answer. We turned to head back. That's when I noticed something on the wall. A small access panel. It was slightly open. Just a few inches. Enough to break the clean line of the wall. I pointed. That opened before? Luis stopped. No. We approached it slowly. No sound from inside. No movement. Just that narrow gap. Luis reached out. Then stopped himself. Wait. He pulled his hand back. What? I asked. He didn't look at me. Rule, he said. Which one? He swallowed. If something is partially open that should be closed, don't be the one who opens it further. I stared at him. That's a rule? It is now. That was not comforting. We stood there for a moment, either of us moving. Then, from inside the panel, a sound. Not loud. Not sudden. Just breathing. Slow. Steady. Close. Like someone was just on the other side of that thin metal door. I felt my entire body go cold. Luis didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even look at me. The breathing continued for maybe 5 seconds. Then stopped. Silence again. Luis keyed his radio, voice controlled but tight. Dispatch, we have a partially open panel in East Tunnel. Requesting maintenance verification before interaction. Dispatch didn't respond immediately. Then, stand by. Those 2 words stretched too long. Too slow. Finally, maintenance confirms no active work in that section. No scheduled access. Luis nodded once. Copy. We are not engaging. Returning to post. We backed away. Not turning our backs. Not rushing. Just putting distance between us and that panel. The moment we reached the end of the tunnel, Luis exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. What the hell was that? I asked. He shook his head. Doesn't matter. It does to me. No, he said firmly. It doesn't. That's the point. I didn't like that answer. Not even a little. Back in the security office, Carla was waiting. She looked at us, then at our faces, and didn't bother asking if we'd found anything. Panel? She said. Luis nodded. Breathing? She added. My chest tightened. You've had that before? I asked. She didn't answer me directly. Instead, she said, Good call not opening it. That's it, I said. That's all you're going to say? She met my eyes. What do you want me to say, Mercer? I want to know what's in there. Her expression didn't change. No, she said. You don't. That ended the conversation. But it didn't end the night. Because at 5:12 a.m., less than an hour before shift change, the same phone at the barrier post rang again. And this time, I didn't answer it. Luis did. He picked it up slowly, like he already knew what was coming. Security, he said. Silence. Then, his face changed. Not fear. Not shock. Something worse. Recognition. What? I whispered. He didn't respond. He just listened. For a long time. Too long. Then he said very quietly, No, and hung up. I stared at him. What did it say? Luis didn't answer right away. He just looked at the phone. Then at me. And finally said, It gave me directions. My stomach dropped. To where? I asked. He hesitated. Then, to the stairwell. The same stairwell. S12. Where we had heard the footsteps. Where the note had warned us. Do not follow the second set of footsteps. Luis grabbed his jacket. I'm going down there, he said. Are you insane? I snapped. After everything. If it's telling us something specific, we need to know why. That's exactly what it wants. He stopped. Looked at me. You coming or not? I should have said no. Every instinct I had, every rule, every warning, every piece of logic, told me to stay put. But I didn't. Because by then, I needed answers more than I needed safety. And that was the moment everything started to go wrong. We didn't tell Carla. That's the first mistake people always make when they look back on a bad night. They think the mistake was something big, something obvious. But most of the time it's small. A decision that feels temporary. A shortcut justified by curiosity. Luis didn't radio it in. I didn't stop him. We just left. The walk from the barrier post to S12 felt longer than it should have. Dawn was still an hour away, but the sky had that faint gray pressure behind it, like the world was preparing to wake up without us. The ice had stopped falling, leaving everything coated in a dull sheen that reflected the security lights in warped halos. Neither of us spoke. The plant looked different from the outside at that hour. Quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Just waiting. When we reached the access point, Luis badged us in without hesitation. The stairwell door opened with that familiar hydraulic resistance, then released. We stepped inside. Same concrete. Same metal railings. Same echo. Nothing visibly different. But I felt it immediately. That subtle wrongness. Like walking into a room where an argument just ended. Luis started down first. I followed. Step by step. The sound of our boots echoed down the shaft, bouncing off the walls in tight, controlled bursts. Halfway down, we both heard it. Footsteps. Below us. Slow. Measured. Exactly like before. Louis stopped. I nearly walked into him. The footsteps continued. Then, a second set joined. Out of sync. Just like the note had warned. I felt my chest tighten. Louise, I said quietly. We don't do this. He didn't respond. He was listening. Counting maybe. I don't know. Then he took another step down. The footsteps below matched it. I grabbed his arm. Stop. He pulled free, not aggressively, but firmly. It's showing us something, he said. No, I snapped. It's leading you somewhere? He turned his head slightly toward me, just enough that I could see part of his face in the dim light. What if that's the same thing? That answer scared me more than anything we'd heard. Because it meant he wasn't thinking like a security officer anymore. He was thinking like someone being guided. The footsteps below stopped. Silence filled the stairwell. Heavy. Pressing. Then, a single step. Not below us. Behind us. From the upper landing. I froze. Louise didn't turn. Don't, he said quietly. Another step. Closer. There was only one set this time. I could feel it. You can tell when someone is behind you in a confined space. It's not sound, it's presence. A shift in the air. In your body. Louise, I whispered. Keep facing forward, he said. Another step. Closer still. Then, breathing. Right behind us. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just there. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Say something, I muttered. Louise didn't. The breathing continued. Then a voice. The same one from the phone. Calm. Close. You're early. Every instinct I had screamed to turn around. I didn't. Louise spoke instead. Who is this? There was a pause. Then, you weren't supposed to come yet. My hands were shaking. This isn't real, I said under my breath. This isn't. It is, Louise said quietly. Just not how you think. That wasn't helpful. The voice behind us exhaled softly. You brought someone, it said. A beat. That complicates things. I felt cold spread through my chest. Louise finally spoke again. What do you want? Silence. Then, go down, the voice said. Louise moved. I grabbed him again. No. No, we're done. We leave. Now. He shook his head. If we leave now, we learn nothing. If we stay, we might not leave at all. That landed. Hard. For a second, either of us moved. Then, from below, the two sets of footsteps started again. Slower this time. Like they were waiting. Louis looked down the stairwell. Then back up. He made a decision. We go halfway, he said. Then we reassess. That's not a plan. It's what we've got. Before I could argue, he stepped down. I followed. Because I wasn't about to be alone in that stairwell. We descended slowly. The footsteps below kept pace. Always just out of sight. Never rushing. Never stopping. We reached the lower landing. Same as before. Empty. The corridor beyond was dark, The motion lights slowed to respond. Luis stepped off the last stair. I stayed one step above him. "See?" he said. "Nothing." The lights flickered on. And something moved at the far end of the corridor. Not clearly. Not enough to identify. Just a shift. A shape where there shouldn't be one. Luis saw it too. "What is that?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He took one step forward. The shape moved again. Further down. Like it was backing away. Leading. "Luis," I said. "Stop. This is exactly what the note." "I know what the note said." "Then act like it." He hesitated. Just for a second. Then, behind us, the voice again. Closer than before. "You're almost in the right place." I turned my head slightly, just enough to see the edge of the stairwell behind us. There was no one there. But the space didn't feel empty anymore. Luis took another step forward. The shape at the end of the corridor shifted again. "Waiting." "Luis," I said, quieter now. "Listen to me. If this thing wanted to help us, it wouldn't need rules." He stopped. That hit him. I could see it. Then, from somewhere deeper in the corridor, a third set of footsteps. Not matching the others. Faster. Irregular. Wrong. Luis froze. The shape at the end of the hall stopped moving. And for the first time, it didn't feel like we were being led anymore. It felt like something else had just entered the situation. Something not part of the pattern. The voice behind us spoke again. And this time, it wasn't calm. "Leave," it said. Luis didn't argue. Neither did I. We turned. Carefully. Together. And walked back up the stairs. Not running. Not rushing. But not stopping either. The breathing behind us was gone. The footsteps below had stopped. But that third set, that irregular one, followed us up. Faster. Closer. By the time we reached the top, we were moving as fast as we could without breaking into a sprint. Luis shoved the door open. We got out. And slammed it behind us. The sound of the footsteps stopped instantly. Silence again. We stood there, both breathing hard. Neither of us speaking. Then Luis said, "We broke the rules." I nodded. And something else showed up. He looked at the door. Then at me. "Yeah," he said. And I don't think it was the same thing. That was the moment we understood. The rules weren't just about avoiding one thing. They were about avoiding everything else that came when you didn't follow them. And we had just ignored one. We didn't report what happened in the stairwell. Not fully. Luis logged it as unverified auditory anomaly, with no escalation. I backed his report. Carla read it, looked at both of us for a long moment, and then signed off without a single question. That was worse than if she challenged it. Because it meant she already knew. After that night, everything became simpler in a way that didn't feel like relief. We stopped asking why. We just followed the rules. Strictly. Completely. Without exception. And for a while, things stayed quiet. No voices. No misplaced objects. No footsteps where there shouldn't be any. Just the normal rhythm of the plant. Patrols. Logs. Radio checks. It almost felt like we'd been let off. Luis didn't believe that. Places like this don't just stop. He told me one night around 2 a.m., while we were doing a perimeter sweep. They pause. For what? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, for you to forget. I didn't forget. Not after the stairwell. Not after that third set of footsteps. A week later, I got reassigned. Temporary rotation. Interior monitoring. Camera desk. I didn't like it at first. It felt like being pulled away from the job. But after a few hours watching the feeds, I realized something. You see more from the cameras than you ever do on foot. Patterns. Gaps. Things that don't line up. At 3:11 a.m., during my second night on the desk, camera 12, the maintenance tunnel, flickered. Not enough to alarm. Just a brief distortion. I leaned forward. Watched. Nothing. Then again. Shorter. Less than 5 seconds. I checked the log. 2 instances. I sat back. Waited. At 3:17. A third. Protocol said we should dispatch a unit. I reached for the radio. Then stopped. Because I remembered something. The panel. The breathing. The rule threshold. 3 times in an hour. But what if? What if the rule wasn't about when to respond? What if it was about when not to? I didn't call it in. I just watched. The camera stabilized. The corridor empty. Still. Then, at the very edge of the frame. Movement. Not in the tunnel itself. Just beyond it. Where the camera couldn't fully see. Like someone standing just out of view. Watching the corridor. Waiting. I felt my chest tighten. Luis, I said into the radio. You near the east corridor? A pause. Then, yeah. Why? I hesitated. Then, don't go into the tunnel. Another pause. Longer this time. Copy, he said finally. That was it. No questions. No pushback. Just trust. I leaned back in my chair. Eyes still on the screen. The movement at the edge of the frame. Stayed there. Not entering. Not leaving. Just present. After about 30 seconds, it was gone. No fade. No transition. Just gone. Like it had never been there. I logged it as camera interference. Same as everyone else would have. That's how this place works. You don't lie. You just don't say everything. At shift change, Luis met me outside the building. Cold morning air. Frost on the railings. Normal. Too normal. You saw something, he said. I nodded. Told you not to come in. Yeah. He looked back at the plant. Then at me. You learning? I think so. He gave a small, tired smile. Good. We stood there for a minute. Then I asked the question I'd been holding on to since the beginning. Luis, what do you think it is? He didn't answer right away. He just watched the building. Then finally said, I think this place runs on rules we understand. A pause. And some we don't. That stuck with me. Still does. I left the job 3 months later. Not because I was scared. Not exactly. Because I realized something important. The people who stayed. They weren't the ones who figured it out. They were the ones who accepted it. And I wasn't sure I wanted to become that. Before I left, Duffy, my old training officer, called me into the office one last time. He slid a familiar stapled packet across the table. Updated version, he said. I flipped through it. Most of it was the same. Procedures. Post orders. Standard stuff. But at the back, there was a new section. Unofficial. Typed. Clean. Organized. I read the last line, and felt that same cold weight settle in my chest. Duffy watched me. Everything in there? I asked. Everything we know, he said. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. I nodded. Closed the packet. Left it on the table. Keep it, he said. I'm leaving. Doesn't matter. I hesitated. Then took it. I still have it. Locked in a drawer I don't open often. Because every once in a while, late at night, I think about the stairwell. About the footsteps. About the voice that told us to leave. And the thing that followed when we didn't. And I wonder, if we hadn't gone down there, if we had followed every rule from the beginning, would we have been safer? Or would we have just never realized how close we were to something much worse? There's one rule in that packet that wasn't there when I started. Added after my last week. I didn't notice it until I reread everything at home. It's written in the same neat, neutral language as the rest. No explanation. No context. Just a directive. It says, if you hear more than 2 sets of footsteps in S12, do not remain in the building. I never told anyone this part. But the night before I left, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. in my apartment. No alarm. No sound. Just awake. And for a few seconds, I could hear it. Not outside. Not in the hallway. But inside my apartment. Footsteps. More than 2. Out of sync. Moving slowly across the floor. Toward my bedroom door. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't make a sound. And eventually, they stopped. I stayed there until morning. Didn't open the door. Didn't check. I don't know what would have happened if I did. And I don't plan on finding out. Because some rules, you only have to break once to understand why they exist.